Okay, well, it is a pleasure to have with us today Janet Biehl. Janet's someone who I first met back in December of 2014, a long time ago now, in on an academic delegation to Rojava. And she's been involved with the Kurdish movement ever since. And I've had the pleasure to meet her on multiple occasions to participate in delegations, and we've come across one another multiple times. And so I just thought that this, given the fact that we at Peace in Kurdistan are doing some of these interviews, we thought it would be great to talk to you and timely to talk to you as well. So thanks for agreeing, Janet.
Thanks for inviting me, Jeff. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah. So why don't we begin by just having you tell a little bit about how you got involved in the Kurdish movement?
Well, that was back in 2011. I was in the middle of writing a biography of my late partner, Murray Bookchin, which hadn't been published yet, but would eventually be published as Ecology or Catastrophe, The Life of Murray Bookchin. And I was in the middle of doing research about it when, out of the blue, I got an email from a young man named Ercan Eboya, who was organizing the Mesopotamian Social Forum in Diyarbakir that fall, and he invited me to come and participate. And I had never been to Turkey before, never thought of going there, but this sounded interesting. So I jumped on a plane and went, and it was just this whole new world opened in front of my eyes. It was a brilliant conference about ecology and women's liberation. And I saw just this whole array of issues being discussed on panels. I saw these tough looking old, looked like maybe PKK fighters, these men listening to 20-year-old women talking about women's rights. And I thought something is going on here. They didn't blink. They didn't, like shift in their seats or anything. They were paying close attention to women. I thought there's something really strong going on here. And while I was there, I met a couple of German solidarity activists who said they were in the process, that after the conference, they were going to travel around the area to look at the new democratic institutions that the Kurdish movement was building, and partly based on Murray's ideas. And I thought, I must know about this, but I don't know Kurdish, so there's no point in me asking to accompany them, but I do know German. So I said, you're going to write about it in German afterwards, aren't you? And they said, yes. I said, well, why don't you send it to me afterwards, and when you're finished, and I'll translate it into English. And so they did. They did their field work and wrote it up as and I did translate it as Democratic Autonomy in North Kurdistan. It was one of the few resources in English to be around at the time that people started thinking about the Kurdish Freedom Movement in Rojava. So it turned out to be very, very timely publication. And some of the same individuals or overlapping people in the German movement were talking about going to northeastern Syria to look at what the Kurdish movement was doing there. And of course, I was very curious about that. It seemed I was getting the impression that the German solidarity movement was far ahead of the English-speaking solidarity movement, and that they had materials that needed to be translated. So as soon as some of them said they were going to go to Rojava in 2014, I was all ears and looked at the essays that they wrote. And actually, when I was able to go to Rojava with Jeff on the delegation in December of 2014, I was carrying some rough drafts of translations of their articles there. They're very useful, very informative for us on our delegation.
Yes.
And then when I came back, it was clear that they were going to publish a book. It was the first big field study based on hundreds of interviews and by people who know the languages. And that was published as Rev Revolution in Rojava, which I translated into English. It's co-authored by Michel Knapp, Anja Flach, and that same man, Ercan Eboya. And that would turn out to be also a well-timed and useful book for a while. So yeah, I'm very pleased. Since then, there's been quite a lot of research, and on the revolution as it's proceeded since then. But both these books had their moment in time and may still be valuable resources for people. And then I went to a Kurdish conference in Hamburg, and I saw my friend Anja Flack putting out some books on a table, some German translations that she recently made from Turkish, including the biography of Sakine Jansis, the first volume. I think she had just finished translating the second volume. And I said, "Oh, what's this? Oh my gosh, where's the English translation?" And she said it doesn't exist. So it was clear, given the overwhelming importance of Sakine Jansis in the Kurdish movement, I thought, this cannot stand. There must be a translation. So it's a 3-volume memoir, and I got to work, and Pluto Press published volume 1 as Sara a few years later when I finished. I translated it from the German, not from the Turkish, but I had a Turkish speaker, check my work. And then volume 2 was published sometime after that, also by Pluto. This is the book about, well, volume 1 is about growing up in Turkey and how she got involved with the Kurdish movement back in the 70s. It ends with her arrest in 1979, shortly after the PKK is founded, where she was one of the co-founders. And then this volume 2, is about her experiences in prison. She spent, 1979 to 1990 in Turkish prisons, including some real hellholes, and basically led the resistance, became one of the stalwarts of the resistance there. By resistance, that means not informing, not giving, not squealing not talking under torture, but holding out under torture. Took an enormous, I'm sorry about my cat.
That's okay.
I just fed her. It took enormous strength of will and a steely spine to do that, to do what she did. And she came away, by the time she was released in 1990, she was enormously respected. And then the volume 3 is about her time after that. That's still underway. Okay. I've done a draft of it. It's a little more complicated than the first 2. Because she returns, the PKK to which she returns is somewhat different from the one she had last experienced 11 years earlier. Plus, she had fallen in love with a man in prison who turned out to be the most significant rebel against the authority of Abdullah Öcalan's authority within the PKK, that in the history of the movement. That was who she fell in love with. So let's just say there were some transition problems. Volume 3.
Very interesting.
Well, it is interesting. In fact, Jeff, to tell you the truth, I think it's a drama of all but Shakespearean proportions. I mean, can you imagine this movement to which she's dedicated her life? And then she falls in love with someone who turns out to be its biggest challenger. So what the man was challenging was not the goals of the PKK, but the authority of Abdullah Öcalan, who had become very, very powerful. Whether he wanted it or not, he had been given a huge amount of power in the PKK, and that created some problems. And so she had to reintegrate herself into the PKK, and the writing of volume 3, I think, was part of her reintegration process. There's nothing about organizing women, all the things she's famous for now. There's nothing about organizing women in there. It's all about her reintegration into the movement. And she never really finished revising it. It was edited by the PKK, and she didn't have a last word on it. And so there's a lot of really unsettled things in the book. And I'm not clear about what's going to happen with that manuscript now. It's very sensitive, so as you can imagine.
Yeah, very interesting, very interesting, and so much work you've put into the movement. It's such a service in terms of just in terms of the amount of material you've rendered available for those of us who can't speak German or Turkish. So
I'm glad it's been helpful.
Yeah. So anyhow, I guess it would make sense for us to talk about, recently you've been involved I think it was last year where you finished this graphic novel. And then you've been involved in this 100 Reasons campaign that's going on right now. If you want to talk a little bit about that, that would be really interesting for us.
There's a wonderful, wonderful campaign now that's being organized by some Kurdish women in Europe called 100 Reasons to oppose Turkish femicide. They've isolated 100 specific women. Many more women, and of course many men, have also perished for resisting the tyrant Erdogan. But they've made the brilliant move of isolating 100 of them and featuring each one is part of this campaign in order to raise awareness, and also to it's a signature campaign. They have a petition drive underway, which hopefully people who are interested will go to their website 100-reasons.org/petition and consider adding your signature. It will be used for movement purposes to try to call attention to the atrocities being perpetrated by the dictatorship there. And the campaign culminates on International Women's Day, which is another great move, a very, very, very important. So I decided I wanted to get involved with this. And you see, my perpetual problem is that I live far away from everything that's going on. I live far away from where Kurds live. I live in the United States, far from Europe, where there's a lot of Kurdish solidarity activism. So my problematic is always, what can I do from a distance alone? So I thought, and since I've been developing my artistic skills more, I thought, well, I'm gonna draw each of these 100 women and print and put one per day on social media. So if you like, we can take a look at some of them.
Yeah, that would be great.
Oh wait, no, I didn't. I didn't do screen sharing. Wait a second. Let me put on. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Share screen. Here we go.
There it is.
Is that working?
Yes, it's working beautifully.
Okay, so there's number one, of course, is Sakina Jansiz herself. I'll show you just a few of these. Executed in Paris by Turkish intelligence.
Coming up on the anniversary, the 8th anniversary.
The 8th anniversary, where these three, Sakina, Fidan, and Layla, were all murdered in cold blood by Turkish intelligence. The arm of Erdogan reaching into Europe is very long, and the murders they've never found justice. The individual who perpetrated these murders has since died and some people think maybe that's why he was chosen to carry out the dirty deed, is because he was ill to begin with, had a mortal illness to begin with, and might have been chosen for that purpose. In any case, the investigations have been inadequate. There's some caution on the part, to put it mildly, on the part of maybe the French government, of the German government, to go against Erdogan. They seem to have difficulty defying his wishes, even to the point of bringing to justice perpetrators of crimes on their soil. So we're still hoping that one day these three women will have justice, as well as the other women who've been killed. This is Hevin Khalaf, who was killed during the Turkish invasion of October 2019 of northern Syria by mercenaries that were backed by the Turkish state. She was brutally raped and tortured before she was murdered. She was a very important political activist. Let's go back to, let's stay there. Another thing I've done is with my artwork. But before I leave that topic, just let me recommend that everyone please go to the website 100-reasons.org and sign the petition, please, and help with the movement to bring international attention to these atrocities. the next one that you started to see that I showed briefly is some paintings I did for a fundraiser. I'm very concerned about how to help the people of northeastern Syria during these times of great duress for them, and it seems one of the best organizations in terms of to which one can donate is Hevasor Kurdistan, Kurdish Red Crescent, who are a very important on-the-ground organization in bringing humanitarian and medical aid to people of northeast Syria who are in dire need of it. And so there have been some fundraisers, and I like to draw dancing. So I made a number of these paintings.
Beautiful.
I think dancing is part of how Kurdish people have survived over all these years psychologically. I think it's one thing that keeps their heads above the water, keeps them resisting. In some ways, it reminds me of blues music in Mississippi during slavery and Jim Crow times, when that's how one way that Black people in the United States survived. I think the dancing is very important. So it's they give each other strength, and I think it's very beautiful, and so I love to draw it. The last one, okay. But yeah, so I was able to help out Hevasor that way. And as you mentioned, Jeff, I've been working on a graphic novel. It's early 2019, two young filmmakers based in the UK invited me to spend a month with them going around Northeast Syria, exploring the revolution, and as they put it, looking for traces of Murray Bookchin, my late partner, whose writings influenced the Rojava Revolution. And of course, I was thrilled to participate. And it turned out that I basically became a presenter and went around with a camera behind me and a microphone boom above me and translators at my side, and was interviewing people for a month. We were interviewing important activists. We interviewed Amina Osse, who we met back in December 2014. And also just people in the street. You know, one thing I always wanted to do during the previous visits was talk to ordinary people. How is the revolution going for you? How has it been since 2012? Has it been successful? Has it changed your life? What's going on? And this was an opportunity to do that. I finally had that wish fulfilled, as I say, because
I'm so envious.
I wish you'd been there. You would have had probably better questions for me. But
next time, invite me. I might take you up on it.
Okay. So we had some wonderful interviews there, and they were filming the whole time. And as soon as we hit the ground, they hit the ground back in May after the visit. They started working on their film, which is titled Road to Rojava. Production is nearing completion now. They're expecting to complete production in March, and then try to distribute the film to find a distributor or submit it to film festivals. And when I got home, I realized that I needed to do something with this material myself. I had taken a lot of notes. I'd made a lot of drawings, and was originally thinking maybe an illustrated book. But I felt that I was so privileged to have had this experience of just being able to go around and talk to people and see the things that I saw, that I wanted to share the experience just as I'd had it with readers. So I decided to basically write a graphic novel. It's not even a novel now, it's a memoir. It's a memoir about my month, a graphic memoir about the month I spent there and what I went through. And it's basically I'm trying to present it pretty much as it happened, to share that experience with people.
That's brilliant, Janet. That's brilliant.
You know, you have to, when you have such good fortune, it's important to share. So, and I was obviously curious to know how the revolution had changed since we were there in 2014. how things had changed. After all, there'd been a whole war since then. The war against Islamic State it was just starting in 2014 when we were there.
Yeah.
And Kobani was under siege.
It was still under siege when we were there.
Right. And then the last piece of territory controlled by Islamic State in Syria was taken by the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, in March, and I was there in April. So this is just 1 month after the final territorial defeat of ISIS in Syria. ISIS is still a problem, obviously, in the Northeast with refugee camps and stuff, but they were defeated there. So how had that, I was obviously dying to know how things had changed there. What kind of progress had the revolution made? And so it was important to me to ask about that. Another great point of interest for me was the project for which I had originally been invited was to look for traces of Booksham, to study, to look for, especially the democracy. You know, I'm particularly interested in that. I told one of our fixers when he asked me what I wanted to see there. I said, well, you know, I'm kind of a democracy nerd. And he said, nerd, we have that word in Arabic too. He knew just what I meant. He said, I'll show you something. So we actually went to meetings, to commune meetings at different levels of the commune council system, the base democratic system. And then we met some individuals in the self-administration from the more upper reaches. So I really got a chance to explore that more thoroughly. So here's just a few drawings that I made there. This is Kamishlo. This man here was someone I interviewed. I went up to him and said, so really, how is it with women being empowered in the Northeast? I mean, are there resentments? How are men here coping with that? How are you handling it? And he said, this guy said, it's not even an issue. It's not even an issue. Of course, women are equal to men and can do. That was, and I later came to find that was quite a universal feeling, not least partly because of tradition, partly because of Kurdish women and their allies have struggled for equality, but also because of the war against Islamic State. That was one of the changes I observed, was that the position of women, the equal position of women, seemed even more secure to me than it had in the past, because women had shown their fighting mettle. They had actually fought very well side by side with men. They were just as good, and dispelled any stereotypes about women being less capable fighters. And so, if nothing else, that war against Islamic State had solidified women's equality there. So that was very gratifying to know about. And this is a meeting of Congress Dar. They're working on developing the bylaws for an organization of all women throughout they want it to encompass all women throughout the Northeast. And these are women from all different ethnicities there. There's Assyrians there, as well as Kurds and Arab women there. You can see that it's written in several languages. They're working on the language of the bylaws and the Constitution there. And I said, why are they spending so much time on verbs and grammar inflections? And my translator told me it's because the document is in Arabic, and there's a lot of different subtleties of meaning in Arabic, and so it needs to be very clear and very concise. So they have this whole auditorium full of women to discuss this problem. It's just brilliant. And this is in a room where, 10 years ago, Syrian people would have been concocting different ways to torment Kurds, right? This is it. This is the same auditorium. So it's in Amuda. We visited some YPJ. It's very wonderful, very, very inspiring to see them. We went to a funeral. This is a funeral for a special forces fighter who had been killed by an IED. This is the special forces fighters wear almost black when they're fighting, and they have different uniforms from regular YPG and YPJ. And just was just a very, very emotionally riveting experience to go to a funeral for a YPG fighter. Just riveting, and just so heart-wrenching. We also visited, this is one of the Assyrian towns along the Kaba River called near Tel Tamer. This is where a man who was from Afrin, he's a Kurdish man from Afrin. He's a displaced person. He had fled Afrin, and he and his fellow people from his community are temporarily living in these deserted Assyrian towns. The Assyrian towns were deserted because they fled Islamic State, right? So the self-administration placed them here while they're waiting for Afrin to be reclaimed. This is an olive tree. He's an olive farmer. He wants nothing more than to go back to Afrin and cultivate olives again. And very wrenching. These are also some of his fellow Afrin Kurds who just want to go back. And they told us stories of what had happened there and how they'd been driven out and what it was like to be invaded by Turkish-backed mercenaries. It's just, that's in the book too. This is back in Kamishlo. These are Assyrians. Kamishlo, I didn't realize, was founded as an Assyrian city. They were very, very mercantile, the Assyrians, and there's a lot of them there. And this is a cafe that was founded 80 years ago by an Assyrian. It's being run by his son now still. And these are men of all different ethnicities hanging around and playing cards and spending time together. I just thought this was a wonderful, wonderful example of just the interethnic comity that I found in so many places during. I told you we visited neighborhood councils, people at the different levels of the self-administration. This is a neighborhood council. You can see it's not, the neighborhood is not the base level. The base level is the commune, the street level, and each commune in a neighborhood sends 2 delegates, 1 man, 1 woman, to the neighborhood council. That's the first level up on the confederal tier. So as you can see here, there's 4 men and there's 4 women, 1 with a baby. And so there are delegates from 4 communes, 4 streets.
Yeah.
And so that's why there's 2 of each gender there. And they're going over issues that pertain to the whole neighborhood as opposed to the street level. Yeah. So and this group in turn sends a delegate to the city level. So we also visited a city council meeting in Kobani made up of delegates from these kinds of neighborhood councils. And we also visited, the peace and justice committees, the committees that are the base level of the judicial system, where conflicts are resolved as close as without courts, without lawyers, by the people, by hearing both sides. I had some drawings of that, but they're in the book. They're not here. So I remember, Jeff, when we were visiting Kamishlo in December of 2014, we went to a commune meeting.
Yeah.
In Kamishlo, they were discussing water and electricity, as I recall.
I remember that vividly, yes.
So that's an urban commune, but there are also village communes, because there's a lot of villages in the Northeast. And so when I told my fixer I was a democracy nerd and wanted to see the democracy, he said, well, have you seen a village commune? I said, no. So we went to an Arab village. This is near the Euphrates River, called Jada. And just like a Vermont town meeting, the Vermont town meetings Murray wrote about, it's in an elementary school. These adults are jammed into student desks. And they were there to talk about the same things that were talked about in that Kamishlo commune meeting that we attended, and all over they talk about. They have 10 committees. to dealing with defense, dealing with women, dealing with economy, dealing with security, dealing with like 10 different health and medicine, 10 different areas. And so in each of these meetings, we had a committee. They're giving us committee reports, and the reason they're looking at me is that I'm sitting up there in front. I guess I'm a guest, and so they wanted to get me too. So I drew them while they were all fixing.
Well, they were looking at you. Brilliant.
And the thing about this meeting, this very notable thing, is that they also talked about the liberation from Islamic State, because this village Jada had been overrun by ISIS, and they talked about how terrible it was. I said, but you're Arabs and Islamic State was Arabs, so what's the problem? And they said, no. They don't even want to talk about religion. They're just all about brutality. We couldn't even smoke cigarettes. They'd cut off our hands. They talked for a long time, not in the meeting, but afterwards. They invited us for chai. About how brutal life had been under Islamic State, how they were afraid if you made one mistake out in public, you could be killed. And one man told me that the worst thing about it was you ended up distrusting your family. You were afraid to go out with your family because one of them might make a mistake and say something that hit a jihadist the wrong way, and then you would all be killed. And so he said the worst thing was they made us distrust our families. But they worked together with the Kurdish battalions of the YPG, which, as you know, are folded into the SDF. And I said, so were there like Arab battalions as well as Kurdish battalions? And they just looked at me and rolled their eyes. Really, it was as if they were irritated by the question. They said, it's not even an issue. Just like that young man in the Kamishlo Street said, women, it wasn't an issue. These guys said, talking about Arabs versus Kurds versus Assyrians, said, it's not even an issue. They're all the same. We all fought together. And that also, I think, was very gratifying to me, because I don't know if you remember, Jeff, back in 2014, the aspiration was there, but it was unclear how well that was really going to work out. And
well, there was the fear there was a fear even going through some of the Arab towns about whether or not there was some sort of complicity with ISIS. Some of that kind of stuff happened. There was also in the Assyrian neighborhoods, there was a question about whether or not, to what extent the Assyrians were down with things. Those were very interesting questions. I'm really happy that you have spent this time looking into these questions. It's really great.
One thing I remember from that 2014 trip was when we went to the Asaish meeting, and they said, one thing we teach our trainees, our recruits for the internal security, Asaish, is no payback against Arabs, no revenge taking against Arabs, as if some Kurds might be tempted to take revenge now that they were in charge, as if, and it's also a true fact that Arabs, the Syrian dictatorship always, part of their propaganda to Arab people was that if Kurds ever take power, they're going to do the same to you what we've done to them.
Of course,
they're going to persecute you. So I remember that we heard it actually in several places in 2014. No revenge taking was what the society was being taught. No payback. Yeah. And this is the result. They were able to. It reflected an insecurity that in this visit seemed to be completely gone. There seemed to be great trust, because of that war in ISIS had welded the society together.
Well, it's also interesting methodologically that this is a visit on which you were the most free to sort of speak to people on the ground. So it's the least filtered by, so to speak, by what I call the embeddedness of our delegations. So that even strengthens your testimony even further, I would say.
I tell you, if women had as much power here in the U.S. as they do over there in the Northeast, there would be so much grumbling and so much complaining. There would be so much pushback. Oh my God! The count. So I had trouble believing it. I and the two filmmakers were asking men, "Oh, come on, there must be some difficulty here." No. They
Mm,
would just laugh at us.
mm,
They
mm,
didn't, there was nothing like that. So I just think there's a whole different attitude. What that raised to me the question of, well, what is masculinity in this society? What kind of, they don't have the kind of toxic masculinity that we have here, but what is this new alternative masculinity that is so different from what we have here in the
mm,
West?
mm.
And I think that needs to be explored more. Um,
What's what's going on in this picture here?
so as I said, this is the one defect of this meeting in Jeddah that I went to, only one woman. That's a problem that I encountered. A lot of there was, well, certainly back in 2014. Remember, there were fears that Arab women would have trouble with the new ways, with being able to work outside the home, to do everything men can do in the society. That maybe a lot of them thought that they would lose their husbands, or that the Quran was opposed to women's empowerment, or there was a lot of that was one of the iffy parts, was how much Arab women would support this revolution.
Mm,
And sure enough, in Jeddah, there's only one woman here. She's the women's committee, and she was brilliant. She was educated. She was articulate. She said, "Women are this," and they all were very supportive of her, and they gave her a lot of responsibility, but still she was the only woman.
yeah.
And that left me puzzled. And then Jeff, we went to see Amina Ossi in
Okay.
Ain Aissa. So Amina Ossi, she was like a deputy vice, equivalent of a deputy vice president there in the whole. She's had a very important position in the South administration. But I said, well, what have you been working on? You said back in 2014 that, it was hard to overcome the mentality of dictatorship in people, and people in the new society, had to unlearn those learn how not to be submissive, how to assert yourself. People have to drive the inner dictator out of their mind. That was a big problem. I said, how's that going? And she said, oh, that's good. That's fine. That's fine. We've made a lot of progress on that. People really do understand and appreciate being able to make decisions for themselves. But one of the big problems that remains is Arab women. And now, don't quote me. I'm just paraphrasing what she said here. But that she was trying to address what she saw as the lacuna of Arab women. So what she had done, as in the intervening years since you and I had been there, of course, the SDF had liberated a lot of Arab territory, Arab villages, including as far south as Raqqa and Tabqa and Deir ez-Zor. Those were integral parts of the self-administration now. And Amina had taken it upon herself to work with some local women to create women's academies.
Mm,
And I said, what are these academies for? To train YPJ fighters? No. Are they like primary or secondary education? No. You go there. So we went to Raqqa and we went to Tabqa, and we visited these academies that Amina had co-founded. And there we met women of all different ages, some moms, some grandmothers, some young women. The sessions were 20 days long, and they're residential. So you all live together. You have to give up your smartphone. No phones.
oh, that's
And,
brilliant. That's great.
and they're being taught about patriarchy. It's basically 20 days of consciousness raising. They're being taught about patriarchy, about how women can do anything men can do. They're taught, and above all, they're taught about democracy. That's what this lecture is about. This lecture is about democracy. And they were absolutely riveted. And the instructor, I tell you, Jeff, I'd like that instructor to come to the United States and go around towns here in the US and teach people about democracy. She was brilliant. She was all about self-rule and autonomy. She would call out, it was almost like she would ask the class questions, and they'd all shout out. She said, what is democracy? What is equality? they were so eager to participate. Now this was toward the end of a session. Their graduation would be the next day, and their husbands would come and take them home, the ones who had husbands, and they'd go back to their normal lives. So, but one thing they were committed to was participating in those commune meetings. This is the other shoe dropping, right? From the meeting at Jada that was mostly men.
Yeah.
The other shoe dropping. This is how Amina was addressing that problem, was training women in democratic practices and ideology. She's so amazing.
Sounds like some footprints of Murray could be seen there with respect to his emphasis on the consciousness raising and the political education, the paideia, the education and the citizenship. Very interesting. Very interesting.
So one of the things we did in the film was go around. The graduation was the next day, so we stayed over and we interviewed these women as the men were coming to bring them home. And we said, what are you going to do with this? Some of them said, I'm going to go to my commune meeting. Some of them said, I'm going to teach my daughters to go to the commune meeting. Some of them said, I'm going to, they had different goals. Yeah. But that's also part of this educational experience in Kurdistan. Yeah. I've noticed in the academies is it's never just about theoretical learning. It's also about practice. It always closes with kind of, in a sense, a platform of where people say how they're going to put this, what they've learned to use. And so they were all ready with answers for me of how they were going to put it to use. So yeah, that was just, in some ways, that was the most thrilling part of the trip, was to see this. And we all danced together, like those Kurds dancing. Yeah. We all did that kind of line dancing that they do to celebrate to celebrate their graduation, and to celebrate that I had got to meet them and they got to meet this American woman. and they got their phones back. That was also a celebration.
I'm not sure if that's reason for celebration, but
well, they were very happy to see their phones again.
I'm sure.
In any case, I think that's the end. Yeah, that's the end.
Wow, it's really excellent material, Janet. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
And it sounds like just an amazing trip. I look forward to seeing I guess it's a graphic memoir, we'll call it, no?
Graphic memoir, that's really the best term for it.
Which hopefully will come out soon.
Yeah, I think it's, as I say, PM Press hasn't announced it definitively yet, although we have contract. It's going to be announced in the spring, and then they're expecting it to be on the list for spring 2022. So it's going to be a bit of a wait.
Just a contribution on multiple levels, just methodologically in terms of mixing the art with the political message, and also with respect to just the trip, the multiple trips that you've taken, the investigation into it. It's just very moving. It's amazing, Janet.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess one last question, just because I have been spending quite a lot of time reading Murray Bookchin lately, and that's ultimately how originally you got involved in the movement, was linked into your relationship with Murray. And what do you think Murray would have to say about all of this?
Oh, I think he would be just absolutely thrilled. I have to tell you, I thought of him every day during that month I was there, and thought, if only he could see this, if only he could see this. Especially those commune meetings, that Arab, basically an Arab town meeting, that would have blown his mind. Yeah. He would have been so excited. He would have been so thrilled. And by the interethnic solidarity, by the, he thought that democracy was a level upon which we all could meet. He believed in, his emphasis was on our common humanity. He didn't really talk so much about, he didn't use the word interethnic so much or multi-ethnic so much. It was more about looking at our common humanity, and that was a choice he made. For me, I call it multi-ethnic democracy. I think that's the problematic here of, can multi-ethnic democracy survive? Can it, is it possible? Because as soon as people so tend to deteriorate into prejudice and tribalism, and how can it survive, and can it survive? And I think for me, one of the most thrilling things about this experiment is it is an example of multi-ethnic democracy
Oh yeah.
that is working in ways that it's certainly not in the United States these days.
No.
You know, I mean, we have with all the white supremacy, and it's running amok there now.
Yeah.
It's very comforting to look, given just the horrendous racism that's the Trump presidency has shown was really there all along, and allowed to grow and fester and terrorize everyone. It's very comforting to see people to know that it can be done, to know that it can be, to look at Rojava and to look at the Northeast. We don't call it Rojava anymore because that's a Kurdish name. So to look at the Northeast and see that people can genuinely come to respect and honor each other across long-standing ethnic differences.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the most inspiring of the aspirations, and it's great to hear that you witnessed it in practice, being realized in practice. This what I call kind of a great achievement of re-articulating self-determination along the lines of radical democracy that is associated with women's empowerment and associated crucially with multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious accommodation. So I think it's one of the things that makes the Kurdish Freedom Movement so unique, is that they have managed to transcend what was originally a national liberation paradigm to help redefine what self-determination can mean in the 21st century. And so I think that's really one of the most inspiring points of the Kurdish experiment, as you call it. So
that's beautifully said, Jeff. I totally agree.
Yeah, well, I remember talking to you about it back in 2014. So it's a conversation. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's just a long-standing conversation. It's a long-standing conversation, and I'm so glad to get the chance to listen to your experience in your most recent trip.
And this is also why it's so incredibly important for the world to recognize what's going on in Rojava, and to understand that the worst enemy, the greatest threat to this revolution, and to this gem of an experience, is the AKP party in Turkey that threatens it, that continues to threaten it, that is shelling Ain Issa, where I talked to Amina Ossi, is shelling Ain Issa even today. Shelling Tel Tamer, where I interviewed those people from Afrin, those Kurds from Afrin. Those villages are being shelled now. Those two places. It's super important to do what we can to try to bring Erdogan to justice. And again, please sign the petition. Help with just, if nothing else, help with just take that one step of signing the petition. And you too can help contribute to movements for democracy and gender equality.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Janet, for just a really fascinating discussion, and also just really powerful artistic expression. A picture speaks 1,000 words, as they say, and it's just really beautiful stuff. So thank you very much for sharing with us.
Thank you for hosting me. It was a pleasure and an honor to speak to you, and under the auspices of Peace in Kurdistan.
Yeah.